Bitcoin gives you self-sovereignty as a person, but it also can give a country self-sovereignty, so you're not so dependent on the US or on China or whatever. So it basically scales from the individual to the group to bigger organizations or communities. And why is it so important? Yeah, because this is the reason why you are free. I mean, if you are depending on someone, you're never free. You can't become who you are. You're hindered in a way, taken back. Someone pushes you down in a way. So that's the reason why I feel it's so important.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Anita Posch to the podcast. Anita is a nomad promoting freedom technology, founder of Bitcoin for Fairness and Crack the Orange, and author of Learn Bitcoin. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Anita.
Hi, thank you, Paula, for the invitation.
I've been looking forward to meeting you. I was hoping to meet you in Zimbabwe, where you spend quite a lot of time and where I'm from, but we didn't manage that. But
not yet.
Not yet, but we will.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your Bitcoin journey.
Yeah, sure. So actually, just a couple of days ago, I realized that my Bitcoin journey started 8 years ago. Eight in 2017, April 2017, when I heard about it in a talk at the conference, a tech conference, a future tech conference. And I was immediately taken by it because I feel my work and education and all my interests that I had even before that time, they culminated in a way in the aspects and the properties, the things that Bitcoin is promising to enable. And I thought this is really a thing that makes sense for the world, for the greater good of the world. And I was actually looking for something like that because before that I was a web designer. I did online shopping sites. I was a product lead and things like that, in the classical e-commerce internet scene. And after almost 20 years, I decided, okay, that's enough now. And I don't want to work on platforms that basically get people to consume more products that they actually don't really need. And then my background in urban planning in a way came back also, like my interest for the development or the well development of a society in local cities or areas. And of course, money is a big part of that. And also Bitcoin from its technological foundations, I found it very fascinating. And as a nerd, in a way, I enjoyed how it's built, what the ideas are behind and where. And also the cypherpunks, of course, is a philosophy or the protection of our privacy, I feel is very, very important. And all of that comes together in Bitcoin. And that's why I decided to learn as much as I can about it and start being an educator. Because I thought at that time, and it's still a thing, I want to be like flexible, have a small, efficient structure and not found a big company or something like that. I was never interested in that. And so now as a almost solo entrepreneur, I mean, I have some people who are freelancing for me or are cooperating with me. But other than that, I love the fact that I can be so mobile. As you said, I'm a nomad. So I basically have my office with me all the time and I can work from wherever I am, which has, of course, advantages and disadvantages. But this is the stage where I'm at.
And did you ever have an altcoin journey or you saw Bitcoin right away?
I did not really have an altcoin journey. The only thing I did, like 2018 or something, I thought, okay, why not buy a small amount of Ethereum and try that? But very soon I realized if I want to be educating others, sharing knowledge, I want and I have to focus on one topic, and that was Bitcoin. And for me, even early on, when I didn't know a lot, I understood the differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum or other coins back then. And even back then, it always occurred to me, it seemed to me, it's more like gambling, and to be able to like invest in different cryptocurrencies, you need to know about them. And I'm a person, I wanted to understand Bitcoin, like really, 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 why it can't go to zero anymore, or what does decentralization really mean, and so on, to have trust in it, to go out to people in different countries to share that knowledge, and basically in a little bit being a change agent, trying to show them, hey, this tool is something for you, especially for you. And if I'm not convinced about it, that it's not a scam, that it's secure, that it makes sense, and aligns to my values, which definitely are not gambling or shitcoin casinos. That's why I immediately, I stopped again and sold the Ethereum. So no, I actually did not really have that. I was lucky. I had, in Austria, there is, since 2011 here, there is Bitcoin Austria. And the guys who founded Bitcoin Austria were very focused on Bitcoin, and they, helped me when I started to understand that, the framework and why Bitcoin is so special. And then, of course, early on, Andreas Antonopoulos was a big influence for me. And so it's deeply ingrained in my head. No altcoins for me.
Tell us a little bit about why Bitcoin is so much better than these altcoins, because I'm sure that in some of these countries, people do use altcoins, as we do all around the world. And people think that that this is just the first one. There's going to be something better. We all know that Bitcoin doesn't have a leader, and that's probably one of the biggest. But are there other reasons?
Well, I mean, we never know what's going to happen in the future, but I don't believe that there will be another inception, basically, where you then have no founder, where you don't know who that was, where you don't know, is this person still around or no? This person does not have any influence on Bitcoin, on the technical development and the development of Bitcoin in general. And I believe that this is a big, big advantage. If you compare it to Ethereum or Cardano, they all have their guys, or a foundation. They say, it's not a company, no, but we have a foundation. As soon as you have a foundation and you have milestones in a project, it's not a decentralized project that belongs to the community. So not having that definitely has downsides, which you can see, because until a consensus is reached in Bitcoin, it might be confusing for a lot of people. People might be feeling insecure about the development of Bitcoin in the future, but it's the only really decentralized, neutral and independent platform or blockchain or monetary system, financial network, however you want to call it, that we really have. All the others are copycats, and they very often, because there are people behind it who have done pre-mines, whatever, they have an advantage. Single people, in this company have advantages when they sell more of their stuff. And this always leads to unethical behavior, I believe. And in Bitcoin, we don't have that, no one can decide on the direction, or if you have a lot of Bitcoin, you in principle cannot influence Bitcoin. And that's something I feel which is very important. And especially if you think about the properties like uncensorability and permissionlessness, because these are so important for including billions of people who don't have an ID, who don't have an electricity bill to set up an account at a KYC Bitcoin exchange. So they are excluded, and with Bitcoin they are not. And we are also not scanning the irises of people and exploiting their privacy, basically, and their most important data for commercial success. This is not what Bitcoin is about. It's about inclusion. It's about that you can make financial transactions without being debanked, or that your transactions can be censored, which is especially important in authoritarian-led countries, because that's the way how Bitcoin supports our freedoms and our sovereignty, in that sense that we can decide what we want to do with our money, and it really belongs to us. I think also in Bitcoin, what's so different and important to me is that Bitcoin is money. And I feel as such, it's a platform that is simple enough to be secure, which many other blockchains or projects, they see themselves more as an enabler of smart contracts and this business idea and that complexity to the code of such a system. And from my background as a web developer, I know the more complex things are, the more prone they are to have bugs in it or errors. And this is not what we want in Bitcoin. We want a monetary system where the money that you own with your keys is really secure. And that's why I feel I rather have a simple tool that works and is reliable than a fancy thing. I can do everything, but then I also have bugs, and I can be influenced by a couple of people.
I wanted to ask you about this. I wasn't going to, but I know Solana is widely used, and it has very low fees. I know it has a leader and they can print more if they want. But other than that, that is appealing to some people. And also there are decentralized exchanges where people can buy, but it's not as trusted as Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the platform that the Trump meme coin was built on or is built on. So it enables shitcoining, or let's say casino coins. I like that, actually, the term better than shitcoin, because it really shows what's meant with them. I see all these projects more like companies. These are products. Bitcoin is not a product. That's the big difference. Of course, you can have a blockchain or a Solana or a Cardano or whatever, how they are called, and build products with it. But this is something different. It's different to hold Bitcoin than to buy stock in a company. And if you hold Solana, you're more like holding stock in a company. That's, for me at least, how I explain it to myself, and why I don't want to do this, because I was actually waiting for a permissionless system like Bitcoin, which is totally uncomplicated, because people always say self-custody is so complex and difficult. It is not, I believe. If you actually really put in a little bit of work and education, you can very much and very easily and secure store your keys. With that alone, I can do whatever I want with my money. Whereas I don't know, with Solana, I have never used it. I can't even speak to it, but you rely on a company, you rely on an exchange. And then what's the difference then, please, to a bank account or a stock? I don't see it. I wanted to have this flexibility and that independence and ease of use of my money, where I also have privacy to a degree. For me, this appeal of the uncensorability coming from this idea of Bitcoin, especially, is a human rights tool also. That's so important. I can't use Solana as a human rights tool,
And that was my very next question. Why is human rights so important to you?
Most probably because I'm at that age, or I'm in that age range, that when I was young, there were no queer people on the streets in Austria. I didn't know the word lesbian. No one talked about it. I didn't know that that's me, that this might be my identity or my group of people in that sense. And when I was like 20 or something, we definitely didn't have same rights or equal rights here. As a group, we were discriminated against. And from that perspective, I realized, okay, all people are equal, only a part of them, a small, are not. And from that perspective, I think I learned that it can be difficult if you are not part of the mainstream, if you are maybe not part of the big political spectrum, which is in power in your home country. I learned a lot from that from my grandparents, who always told me about how the time when the Nazis came to Austria. I mean, Austria has invented the Nazis in a way, because Hitler was Austrian. So we have a very close connection to that topic here. And I was always a political person in that sense, very sensitive to these topics about inequality, unfairness, and things like that. These are values that I have. I mean, I am that person, you know. And when then a technology comes along, which is totally in my field of expertise and interest, and it connects to my experiences as a lesbian person myself. And today I only need to go to Kenya or other African countries to see how much discriminated lesbians, gays, transgender people still are, and really are. Yeah, we have it much better already here. Then I know why I'm doing all of that, and then I know why Bitcoin is so important. And if Bitcoin were just a tool for investment, I'm not sure if I ever would have been interested in it. So it's definitely that opportunity for social change, changing wealth inequalities and things like that, that appealed to me so much that I got into that space.
One thing I have noticed is that certain communities that are discriminated against, they don't always stick together. But
Yeah,
you have gone to Africa not only to help gays and lesbians, but to help everybody. Is that just how it
yeah,
worked out?
sure. No, basically, the idea was not to go to help gays and lesbians in the first place. It was just the realization that Bitcoin is a tool, and we are so early, that would enable people who have less access to financial products or opportunities, to enable them to use it now earlier than the people from the wealthy West or North. So in that sense, we could level out a little bit this wealth inequality that we definitely have. And why do we have it? Because the Europeans and the US Americans exploited the African country. We know, you're from Zimbabwe. We know how that worked, and left basically nothing behind, took all the good stuff, and it's still happening. And I thought Bitcoin is a tool not to give back. I'm not Mother Teresa, but it enables the people there to basically step up the ladder and use that tool before the rest in the West uses it, you know? So, that was actually my idea. And then of course, during my work with Bitcoin more and more, I realized how it's a tool, that enforces human rights. At the beginning, I knew it could be a tool to change the wealth disparities, or to do other good things for the community and people worldwide. But I didn't really get it. What's exactly the point, and why Bitcoin is so special? And in the end, if we didn't have the permissionlessness, the uncensorability, and the decentralization, we wouldn't, let's say it like that. If Bitcoin loses that, it doesn't have this appeal anymore. Then we would need another tool that enables this uprising of people, despite the fact that there are powerful forces fighting against them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What are some of the challenges that people in the global south and Zimbabwe in particular face? Because, for example, I started this channel because I went to Zimbabwe and the people that I wanted to adopt Bitcoin weren't interested. And it wasn't my family necessarily, it was the people that needed it a lot. And they just didn't have the extra dollars or even the interest to study it. So, what are some of the challenges you have faced?
Yeah, I agree. It's, I made the same experiences. Like, say, I mean, I, as a European, coming in there and saying, hello, here, I have this great tool for you. Use it. And then nobody uses this. And you are just like, what's going on with you? Why don't you see what I can see? Yeah. But that's what I learned. I mean, people have different problems. They have different approaches to solve them, or maybe they don't have the energy, the tools, the time to learn about it. From that perspective, I feel that Bitcoin is still too complicated in a way. It's not as easy as it can be and will be, I think, in a couple of years. So you still need to learn a little bit. You still need to first understand that it's not a scam, because everyone in Zimbabwe and in other African countries, the first thing they ask you is it not a scam? Can I trust it? Because everyone almost has been scammed there. And the problem also is that Bitcoin has a bad reputation in that sense, not only being a scam, but also from the fact that, like in Zimbabwe, most people who use Bitcoin or needed it, used it to be able to do online gambling or trading. You know, the classical real trading. I want to make money fast. And they needed Bitcoin for it. And that's, of course, not the right connotation in a way, you know. I mean, yeah, you can use it for that, but it's so much more. But from that, it has this negative color in a way, you know. Yeah, then there's the fact that most people can't afford, as you say, to save. And up until recently, it was really difficult to onboard people to Bitcoin. I mean, now we have Liquid and other technologies. Lightning is becoming easier to use. The fees go down. So the entry gets easier. And also as a tool to spend, like use it as money, is more and more possible, like in South Africa, in Kenya, with Tando, and so on. So the things are coming, but the people need it as a tool to spend. So to receive and spend. And of course, but then there is USDT. And I know that many, many more people in Zimbabwe and other African countries are using Tether, because it appeals to them that the value is stable. So a lot of people, of course, say the volatility for me in Bitcoin is too high. I can't afford to lose anything. And if it goes down tomorrow 20%, then I basically have lost almost everything. I totally understand that. Of course, if you could say, but if you can save for a longer period of time, like 3 or 4 years, then Bitcoin makes sense, because the volatility of Bitcoin, first, it will go up, probably, most probably. But on the other hand, it's much less than the inflation in your country. But this is too complex. People don't get that. They would need to use it, to try it for a couple of months or years. But most people live from day to day. They can't afford to do that. If you need to earn $5 a day or $3 a day for your family to survive, you can't go to a Bitcoin meetup. You have a smartphone maybe, but it's broken. You almost can't afford mobile data. So how shall you learn about that, you know? So for me, it started like, I knew, okay, I have to go to the urban centers where people are who can afford a little bit more, you know, they earn a little bit more. They are more tech savvy. And it just took time. I was the first time in Zimbabwe, I did the first 2 talks in Harare in 2020. And then I think in 2022 again. And then Alexandria came to Harare. And after that, he founded Bitcoin Reach. And so there was nothing going on in Bulawayo, the second biggest. You know it, you're from there, but people who listen might not know it's the second biggest city in Zimbabwe. And this time, 2025, we went there and we had a meetup with 30 people. And now we helped Langa set up another Bitcoin group, which is called Yebo Bitcoin. And so now we have 2 groups in Zimbabwe, you know, and it has been 5 years from the time I came first, you know, so it's slow, but I believe since we had 30 people there now and they are studying my Crack the Orange course now. We have Langa on the ground who works with them in Bulawayo. And I feel like in 3 or 4 years, it will be 300 people, you know, and it takes time. So, and also what, of course, I learned is you can't convince people to do that. And I don't want to do that also, because it needs to come from them. Because if the price goes down, they say, but Anita, you told me it's your fault that I lost my money. I don't want that, you know, that's definitely not my responsibility. And I never want to promise anything like it to people. And so it takes time. But what I have been seeing in the last 5 years, like in 2020, coming to Zimbabwe and Botswana, and there was exactly one initiative on the ground that was in Botswana, in the whole continent. Now we have, I don't know, 70, 100, I don't know, and many local groups, African Bitcoiners, Bitcoin Zambia, Bitcoin Vic Falls, it's coming slowly but steadily. Yeah.
That's really amazing. I love to hear about that and the growth. I know that in Zimbabwe there's a problem with not having an exchange to buy Bitcoin, and that fees can get quite expensive. Is this a problem in many countries, and how do you get around that?
I mean, speaking from African countries like in South Africa, so no, Zimbabwe is sanctioned. Also, the Zimbabwean government and Reserve Bank said a couple of years ago, we don't want Bitcoin here. Banks are not allowed to interact with this. They are allowed to do blockchain, but not Bitcoin. And I'm sure they know why, because if everyone in half of the country were to use Bitcoin, then they would lose their source of funds for their kleptocracy. I mean, you could basically stop these kleptocrats from stealing from the country if you were to hold your money in Bitcoin in self-custody. But I think this is something, this penny needs to drop with people. Not many people get that. And yes, the exchanges. So that's the reason why there is no exchange in Zimbabwe. I feel there are some that people can use. Gate.io told me, one friend in Zimbabwe told me that this works. But I think Binance is not working anymore, and all the others are not too. In most other African countries, you have exchanges, but the best is anyways to try to get the money from peer to peer. Or a lot of people in Zimbabwe have relatives in the diaspora. They could buy it there and send it to them, and you will find people on the ground in Zimbabwe who will exchange it happily, because a lot of people want Bitcoin in Zimbabwe, but there is no real possibility to get it. So there's really a liquidity crisis in Zimbabwe because it's so difficult. How? Even if I were to try, or someone, let's say someone wants to bring Bitcoin to Zimbabwe. Okay, you can go to Zimbabwe, you can sell your Bitcoin there, you will get US dollar cash. And what do you do then with that? So you basically, yes, you could buy yourself a couple of cars or houses or whatever, but on a tourist visa, difficult. And you can't get the money out of the country. That's the problem. And that's why there is not a lot of Bitcoin around in Zimbabwe. So the best way still would be to earn it. Like if you work for a company abroad, you could ask them to pay you in Bitcoin. Yeah. So it's in Zimbabwe, the situation is really the worst, I would say, from those countries I have visited, like Kenya, Uganda, and down to Namibia, Zambia, South Africa. I don't know.
So, yes, I was wondering. So you picked the hardest one. I've always thought that about Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
It's very restrictive, but the people are wonderful, and that's why we want to help.
absolutely. The people are wonderful, and the country itself is wonderful. I mean, it's how do you say? It has gone worse. I mean, I've never been there in the 90s, but I know friends have lived there in the 90s, and it must have been great back then. So all the infrastructure is gone. Nothing works. And yes, and that's why I always said, if Bitcoin works in Zimbabwe, it works everywhere. And that's also like from a technological standpoint, if I have wallets that have so low fees that I can use Bitcoin and Lightning or eCash in whatever way in Zimbabwe, then it will work everywhere, because like there's no electricity. I mean, we had in Harare, we had during the night a couple of hours electricity. So of course we have solar panels, but the battery isn't big enough. So during the day also the lights go out or the power goes. And imagine you can't afford solar panels, which most of people can't afford. So how should they use Bitcoin? I mean, we really need to be honest about that. There are possibilities, but not yet for the big parts of the population. But as I said, start small, and one by one, gradually it grows.
Yes, it certainly is. And with Bitcoin for Fairness and Crack the Orange, which you founded, you are helping other countries and people around the world too, right?
Yes, the idea behind Bitcoin for Fairness was like the idea for the name came from the fact that it's a fairness protocol, meaning anyone can use it. So the technological platform is neutral. And I founded that at the end of 2021 because I knew I wanted to go in that direction. I wanted to go to countries in the global south where people live who are less privileged than we are, to support them in founding their local initiatives, guide them or mentor them in a way to set up their own communities and educational initiatives. And this is what we did in person with Bitcoin for Fairness. And then I thought, this needs to be scaled. Like, we need more educators. We need more people on the ground who know about Bitcoin and how to use it. And that's the reason why we then founded Crack the Orange, which is an online learning platform where we give the opportunity to people from African countries or other low-income countries to get a scholarship and to be in a 12-month program where they can learn everything about Bitcoin that they need to know to start their own initiatives, or even just share that knowledge with their families and friends and their communities. And so we started that in 2023. And I think now we had 250 people in the program, and a little bit over 50 have finished successfully. And in many different countries, like from Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Zambia, to Indonesia, but most of them are from the African continent. Yeah, but it's open to anyone in that sense.
That's wonderful. So many of my guests have mentioned you. Diana from Bali, Elahaf yesterday, Olu from Nigeria, Adam and Humphrey from Bitcoin Zambia, and of course the Zimbabweans. So it's amazing how much you are helping Africa. It's really wonderful to see.
I'm actually very, very happy after like 5 years to see the seeds growing into fruits, and then they engage with each other. That was the goal of Bitcoin for Fairness. And I feel in big parts, we reached what we wanted to reach. And it was also always the plan. As soon as there are enough self-sustaining communities that we can basically move back again and only watch. because I feel it's the place for the locals, it's their continent, it's their countries, and they should be the lead is the wrong word, but the community drivers and education drivers. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Why is it so important to be self-sovereign?
Oh, well, that's a general question. Hey, I feel I don't know. This is something I learned very early on when my mother said to me, don't ever be dependent on a husband. Do your education, get your own job, get your own wealth or backup, and be independent.
My
So
mother
from
said the opposite. She said, go to the US and find a rich husband.
yeah, yeah, that's sadly what most women hear, I believe. So I was lucky in a way. Others might say I'm not lucky, I'm poor, but no, I love the fact that I'm my own person. I still, of course, have partnerships, but I'm not depending on anyone. And I feel that what you're doing in the small also applies to the bigger scale, like Bitcoin gives you self-sovereignty as a person, but it also can give a country self-sovereignty, so you're not so dependent on the US or on China or whatever. So it basically scales from the individual to the group to bigger organizations or communities. Is it so important? Yeah, because this is the reason why you are free. I mean, if you are depending on someone, you're never free. You can't become who you are. You're hindered in a way, taken back. Someone pushes you down in a way. Yeah. So that's the reason why I feel it's so important.
Yeah, and even now in the US and in Europe, like you mentioned, we all know that being in a bank, your money's not actually there.
Yeah. But still, a lot of people believe that it's their money. But I know that more and more people feel when their bank accounts are shut down, or when the bank tells you, sorry, we've got no money at the moment, come back in a month, or horrendous fees in parts of the world, and you always have this risk that your money is not there where it should be. And Zimbabweans know that the best.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've had zeros taken off their bank account. Well, in 2008, I think 13 zeros were taken off, and most people lost all their money.
Yeah, that's the one thing. And the other thing, like in 2019, when they reinvented the Zimbabwean dollar, they took all the US dollar accounts on banks in Zimbabwe and switched it to Zimbabwe dollar accounts. So you had $10,000 and then you had 10,000 Zimbabwe dollar. And we know what happened to the Zimbabwe dollar. Only 6 years later, they replaced it with a new currency, now the Zimbabwe gold. And I was there now the last 2 months, and people are not using Zimbabwe gold. No one wants to have it. And even there are no banknotes around. You can't even get hold of it. Zimbabwe is basically a dollarized country. Everyone tries to hold on to US dollars and use it.
The perfect place for Bitcoin and the perfect example, because I spoke to Jeff Booth the other day, and even he, I didn't ask him about it, but even he has the frame Zimbabwe $1 trillion notes on the back of his wall.
Yeah.
And speaking of Jeff Booth, why is it so important for Bitcoin to become a medium of exchange, not just a store of value like we tend to think in the West?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of reasons. So the one thing is, if people were really to use Bitcoin as a money, it would gain a lot of adoption too, because it's like if you use it and you say to someone, I want to pay you in Bitcoin, then they realize, oh, it's not a scam. It's really something that is feasible and that I could use. Well, also, if it's more in the hands of more people in self-custody, then it's even more decentralized. We have more people who can basically decide which wallet they are running and which consensus fork basically they want to be on. When everyone is just holding Bitcoin, most people sadly also have it in custody. That means that actually the exchanges and the companies behind that decide about how they want Bitcoin to evolve in the future. And I mean the technology behind it. And so it also gets a lot of credibility by using it as a money too, because we even now already have that problem, like in European countries where a lot of people and also politicians say Bitcoin is just a tool for speculation. We don't need it. And that's the reason why we regulate it down totally. So instead of enabling us to give us that freedoms, they basically overregulate it because it uses too much electricity and therefore people shouldn't use it because they only speculate, and that's unfair actually to the others who are using the fiat system. So it gives Bitcoin credibility. It increases adoption, and I'm sure it would increase the value of Bitcoin if more people were to use it. And it definitely has a lot of upsides if you're using Bitcoin. I always say, because a lot of people say, I don't want to spend it because it goes up. I don't want to be like the pizza guy, But the pizza guy, he doesn't regret having done that because it was how shall I say, a moment for him where he all realized, hey, this is really a good tool. And he worked in the Bitcoin space, stopped being interested in learning about it. He didn't lose anything actually, because he only, I think he's fine, and he doesn't regret anything. And without people spending it, and in a way it was the intention. I mean, the white paper is called digital cash, and not investment tool for banks. Of course, you can say, yeah, but Satoshi is not around and this is not valid. We want to have something else. But I feel for me, it's money for the people and not for the banks. And yes, the organizations and banks can use it, but they I mean, of course, I can wish for it because I can't influence it a lot, but I feel Bitcoin is definitely also a tool, a money. Yeah. And I feel it's important spending it.
Yeah. And do you think that in the future, Bitcoin will become more stable so that it won't be so volatile?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. The volatility has already been going down and it will further go down. The more people use Bitcoin, the less volatile it will be, because when the market or the distribution is much bigger than now, then let's say big trades cannot influence the price so much more. So it will definitely be less volatile in the future.
And how much are you living on the Bitcoin standard? In Africa, in Europe, how much are you able to?
A difficult topic for, how shall I say, privacy reasons.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
very much like when I'm in Zimbabwe, I'm totally on the Bitcoin standard. That's
wonderful.
how I live.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm 100% on the Bitcoin standard in Zimbabwe.
yeah, wonderful. Do you think there's a spiritual side to Bitcoin?
I think yes, but I'm not so much, how shall I say, I didn't think so much about it in that sense up until now. And I mean, now in that sense, in a way, in this summer, in this European summer, I think about, I want to write more again and think about these kinds of things. I mean, for me, it's a technology, but of course it has learnings, like, for instance, before Bitcoin, I didn't save money because I didn't have enough money to save it. And I didn't get the fact that, like, if I have money saved for 10 years, it makes me 3%. That was not effective enough for me to be pressing on and saying, save, save, save. And with Bitcoin, that was different, because if you really see, okay, it's going down, but it's also going up again, and you feel how much it can change it in only 5 years, then I really started to save hard. And yeah, it pays off, to be honest. Like, saving is something I definitely learned, and that changes your perspective of the world and to the future very much. So now I'm much more like saying, I want to grow old. I want to grow very old, because I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor in that sense, And so it changes the perspective, yeah. And it made me totally mobile, because yeah, I can travel anywhere. I don't need like a bank account in Zimbabwe, which I never wanted to have, and things like that. And like also the freedom to move around and not feeling bound to a place because you have to be there for several organizational reasons is great. So I assume one could find some spirituality or comparisons to the spiritual in Bitcoin, but I haven't thought about too much already yet. I mean,
Yeah, I
like a practical person up until now.
up until now, I like that. Yes, you're right. It is a tool, it's a technology. But as I save in Bitcoin, it gives me more time to reflect and go within rather than being on this treadmill of trying to have enough for retirement one day. So that's the one thing, more time to look in and more hope for the future, because now I have more hope because I was losing hope.
Yeah, that definitely. Also the hope thing, I totally understand, and I see it the same way. So like, heavy weight has been lifted from my shoulders in that sense, and I see that with a lot of people in that space. Of course, at the beginning, it's the same. You work and work and work because you feel it's not enough. And I want to say one thing, like, I don't want to run only to have enough, because you never have enough in that sense, but it is enough at a certain point. I haven't reached that point yet, but it makes you much more free, as you say. Yeah, you can reflect more on what you've done, or you can be more choosy what you want to do in the future. Because yes, you can, like, say, found a new company or have a new idea and follow that for a certain point in time. because you know that your money is secure in a certain sense.
And most likely growing at this point because our governments continue to print money.
Yes, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm always, I mean, I have hope in that sense, but I'm more a very realistic person. I feel there is a lot that might still be coming in the way of Bitcoin. For me, it's not done yet. There are still developments in the space where I feel like I hope it goes in the direction I feel is the right one, like to be able to use it as money, that it's not so down regulated, that we need more privacy in Bitcoin. And I see these things are coming slowly, but we're not there yet. But I'm optimistic still, but then you never know what's going to happen.
Another thing Bitcoin teaches us, patience. Well,
yeah.
Well, I'm really grateful to chat with you today, Anita. I will post links to your website. I know you're more on Nostr. We didn't get to talk about that today. Next time.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anywhere else?
I think the best thing to stay updated on my work is my newsletter. Once a week, it's a free newsletter, and you can find it at anita.link/weekly.
And I'll post that below. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite. Bye.